Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, where we discuss the latest DevOps news, AWS announcements, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's October 29th, 2025. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse sells AWS reference architectures that get you production ready in just 2 weeks. So if you're curious to learn more about that, just go over to cloudposse.com and you'll find the details there. So how can you maximize today's session? The format's very informal. You can engage as much as you'd like. You can ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. And for those on the recording, we host these calls live, and don't miss out. You can join us by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, go ahead and share it with your team. You'll find a recording of this session on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/cloudposse, and it'll be posted in a couple hours. So with that said, let's see what caught my attention this week. First one, no big surprise there. ChatGPT has their browser, Atlas browser, has already been compromised in the usual kind of attack vector that you see in all of these attacks. What do you call it? Prompt injection, basically. So with tainted memories, it's able to do a remote command execution, essentially. I didn't look into more of the details, but I would say you're very brave if you're using it at this time. And on a social engineering scale, I forget where I saw it, it ranked as one of the lowest browsers in terms of security to use. Hold on, my browser blanked out here. What's going on? All right, next one was GitHub has announced a new feature called GitHub Code Quality, which is in public preview. I believe this is a no-code setup where you basically enable the feature and it's able to, make recommendations on pull requests. I would be curious to see to what extent this is available, for example, for open source, but I don't know. I believe this is probably going to require, yeah, here it says it's available today for GitHub Enterprise and Team. And it's currently free during this period. And it's a little bit out of order, but I guess I'll go to this other GitHub announcement, which I thought was interesting. I didn't see it coming, which is custom images for GitHub-hosted cloud runners. And they make it pretty easy. You can basically just go to your GitHub settings. They go through some screenshots here. You go to click on settings, and then you can click on an option to create a new runner. Where was it? Thought I saw a better screenshot somewhere else. But the other option is that you can then run a workflow, and one of the steps has a add a new snapshot type to your job. And then that will memorialize that run as a reusable runner that you can then launch subsequent workflows on. And that's nice because you can speed up your builds. Setting up, you spend a lot of time running install steps for your dependencies, and this works, it's almost like Packer for CI/CD pipelines. You can define a workflow, define what packages you need, so it's still kind of workflows as code, and then you can save that as a reusable runner image to speed up your builds. Obviously, this only makes sense in the hosted environment of GitHub, where they can launch that image then. Any thoughts on this one?
Is this custom only? Custom runners?
This is where custom runners, yeah. No, this is not for custom, like this is not for self-hosted runners. This is for GitHub
Um,
Cloud hosted runners.
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Also, I don't believe this is for open source, and it's currently you have to use it under your subscription for Teams. It's also a public preview, so
Still some time then.
yeah.
But it's cool. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool. I think we'll probably try and take advantage of that for some of our builds. Yeah, so we learned that Azure is down because, well, we were going to release a new version of Atmos today, and oh, wait, is it coming back? No, seems like it's still down. So this URL that's used to with the GitHub Actions to install Helm, that's down. Rumor is that it's tied to Azure being down. This front door service. I don't know what Azure front door is. Anyone enlighten me?
I think it's kind of like CloudFront.
Oh, okay. It's like their CloudFront option. Gotcha.
Yeah. I don't know 100%, but that's about what I think we've been dealing with it as.
That makes sense. And yeah, I saw there's a lot of posts. Oops, I'm not signed in this this workspace, so I can't open that up. But there's just a lot of chatter on X, of course, about this being down. So as soon as that comes out, then I'm excited to discuss Atmos. We will be dropping another release of Atmos today. Let's see if I can find the release notes. These are in draft, so you won't be able to see these yet. What was it? 6. Oh, I'm not signed in this browser, so that's why I can't show you. All right, well, so much for that announcement. I will bring that up next week when we have 196 officially out. But 196 has a slew of improvements that we've merged in for all types of things. Lots of bug fixes around the new feature that we released called Atmos Auth. If you haven't checked out Atmos Auth, it's a way to handle authorization in a uniform way across multiple clouds that works both on your desktop and in CI pipelines, for example. Not everything has been implemented yet. We are prioritizing this feature, but today you can, with this release, you'll be able to run a lot of the commands like a shell that is scoped to a certain set of permissions. You can exec any command. You can use identities with any command in Atmos. So you can tie identities to a component in a stack. This is one of the challenges when you are working with Terraform is what identity do you use to apply something? And this is seldom accomplished by any other tooling that we've seen out there. And this is trying to solve that, making it also very easy to securely store your credentials, leveraging keychains, leveraging environment variables that only point to where credentials can be found instead of containing the actual credentials. So a slight security improvement there. So check out Atmos Auth for that. And that's at Atmos Tools. You just go to reference and auth. So this tells you about that. We'll have some more demo videos for Atmos Auth coming out probably in the next few weeks. But right now, it is the documents. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. So Zoe says that the status page link didn't work because Azure is down. And I thought it was ironic that with AWS being down, was it last week or the week before? Same thing. Their status page is all, well, I guess their status page was up that time, but I was surprised it was even on Amazon.com because I thought we all learned now you don't even put your status page on the same TLD because maybe your TLD is down.
Oh, it's even funnier because the status page actually worked, but they put a link for Learn site that's not working right now.
Oh, okay.
And they removed it very quickly.
Yeah. Another interesting announcement from Tailscale. So Tailscale is a very popular remote access solution. Your typical kind of zero trust proxy. Now, what this does with the peer relays is you can deploy a relay somewhere inside of your network, like in a cloud environment, for example, in a DMZ, and then your other services can access Tailscale via that relay. Previously, I believe each Tailscale instance that you deployed had to have direct connectivity to Tailscale, the service. So this provides another way of routing your traffic.
Is this like Cloudflare Zero Trust?
Yeah, well,
Mm.
I mean,
Or like Twingate, maybe.
They are solving, they are similar approaches for the same problem. How do you access services securely? How do you reduce the amount of infrastructure you need to deploy to access those? And then Cloudflare has one approach, Tailscale has a slightly different one.
Yeah. Or I use Tailscale, but for my private home server, which is cool.
Yeah, the
Well,
pricing
maybe.
is very favorable to,
Yeah, for personal.
home
That one is
labs.
good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I use that one and Cloudflare. But Twingate, I use it for work, which I prefer.
How do you like the Cloudflare access?
Cloudflare, I like it because it's can be a pain, especially where I live. Open ports, it's a whole issue. So
Okay, so
yeah,
that gets you around that problem, right?
yeah. So that solves it really well for me, and also it's well, it's not expensive. The amount, well, I pay $0, which is cool because it's small, right? It's just for personal use, personal photos
Yeah.
of stuff. So I really like it. And
What's that endpoint that Cloudflare provides that makes it so easy to expose any service, like free?
yeah, it's the Zero Trust, but it's on inside of it. It's Cloudflare Zero Trust. Let's see. Actually, I can open my server and tell you. Yeah, Zero Trust tunnels.
Zero trust tunnels?
Yeah. The container you have to have is
Oh, but there's literally just like an endpoint you can like curl or something, and it immediately sets up a tunnel. You don't even need to create an account on Cloudflare to use it, I believe.
really, I don't use I have a Docker container running on my infrastructure, on my
Yeah.
local infrastructure.
Yeah,
There's
I mean, that's the more common way of doing it. I was
It's
just
the 1.1.1 that one app in
well,
App Store.
that's the DNS, no?
Yeah.
But they have an app for that app.
Yeah. No, what I'm thinking about is slightly different. Maybe it'll come to me later.
Oh, now I'm intrigued. What, like without even an account? That's looks interesting.
Yeah. And it's also cool, like let's say you have a local dev environment and you just want to show somebody your current state. It's the same way that oh wow,
The Twingate does it?
say that again?
Twingate? Because Twingate has something similar, but you still need a container to be able to talk to your internal network. But I'm actually looking for
Ngrok.
some
I was thinking of Ngrok is the alternative, but just
Ngrok.
like a Cloudflare Ngrok alternative. Let's see if that was.
Will that open like a temporary tunnel to your private?
Yeah, and it gives you a temporary host name with TLS.
Okay, now that's cool. I'm actually looking for something like that.
Yeah.
It comes Cloudflare Tunnel as a alternative.
You found it?
Well, I think it is. I think it is one. But it's just called Cloudflare Tunnel. Cloudflare. But I think this one is the one that I use. Ecosystems, DNS application. Oh, maybe it is actually. Oh, this is the one I use.
Maybe it's called Quick Tunnel.
Quick tunnel.
Quick Tunnel. It's also part of the Zero Trust thingy.
Yeah, maybe I misrecollected. Yeah, maybe you still need Cloudflare deinstalled and then you can just run this. So, yeah, that was it. Try Cloudflare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so you do install Cloudflare D, and then you can get a temporary host name to like a local dev server. That was it. Sorry, I wasted a little time there. It's just racking my brain trying to remember what it was because I thought
No worries. So that's cool.
Yeah. All right, and then let's see, last announcements here. Covered all that. Oh yeah, so Minio is the pseudo open source, but not open source S3 self-hosted alternative. Source provided, but I believe it has a pretty restrictive license on how you use it. I forget what license Minio is. Yeah, it's AGPL, right? So one of the things they've just done this past week, so there was apparently a CVE release that affected one of their images. Rather than just patch it and re-release it, they used this as a pivot point where they actually pulled all of their Docker images out of the registries, both Quay and Docker Hub, apparently. And they are now redirecting people that if you want a pre-built image, that's one of the reasons that you would want to subscribe to their commercial offering. Alternatively, you can, their recommended approach at this point is just to use go install. I guess that's not documented on here, but basically that's how you use Minio now. You build your own Docker image with the binary built with go install. Obviously, this came as a shock to a lot of people. If you have a deployment of Minio and that deployment was pinning to a public image, then that deployment is no longer working. Or if you get a pod restart or and you redeploy it, it will not work. We see this a little bit more and more as one of the monetization channels open to open source projects. By not providing the binary, which is a convenience, it's one of the mechanisms to incentivize users for subscribing. I obviously don't condone the way they handled this, but I understand. This is also Gravitational Teleport recently did this, I believe, for their distributions of Teleport. All right. Let's see, any other announcements this week? Anything catch your attention? All right, Q&A. Any questions we can answer today?
I don't have a question, but I was reading the try Cloudflare, and it does say what you were mentioning. So you only download the CLI, and then that does it for you, which is so cool. Create a tunnel with the CLI. Not you don't have to like run the container, which is cool.
Yeah, I thought it was even more extreme. Like you could just like curl something and somehow it would work, or you.
That's great. Yeah, it's a bit crazy.
But
Very
yeah,
cool.
just install Cloudflare D, run one command, and you have a public host name accessible for your home lab.
Yeah, this is cool.
I have a quick one. So you kind of I saw in your documentation that about control tower, that you're not using it yet and that you're only using AWS organizations, and that now that it supports all the APIs, maybe you will think about it. Is that something on the roadmap?
Yes and no. So I would say we've at Cloud Posse, we've had FOMO on Control Tower for a long time. But every time we revisit this particular topic, we're reaffirmed in our approach. And allow me to explain. So when Control Tower first came out, it was like, wow, okay, so that replaces all the stuff we've been doing with basically recreating Control Tower, but in native Terraform.
Yeah.
But then as we went to go try it out, we realized, wait, this can't be automated. It's all ClickUps. It's the antithesis of what we're trying to do. And then, like, I don't know, it was a year, 2 years later, they come out with account factories for Terraform at reInvent. And again, we're like, oh, yes, finally. And then we realized, yeah, it's like using Terraform to provision CloudFormation templates. And yeah, they have a module, but it's this crazy apparatus that runs code build pipelines and deploys all of these changes that happen to repositories without a proper like review process, or at least that's how it used to work. Maybe they fixed that now, but I have not yet heard anyone say that they love account factories for Terraform. Just that it does the job, or that, that it was set up by another team, or they hired AWS ProServe and they set it up. But it's not something that I hear good things about. Now, I'm in an echo chamber, of course, surrounded by people who use Terraform. So take what I say with a grain of salt. We were excited then when we started seeing more and more API endpoints coming out for Control Tower, but it's still a very small subset of what you can do with Control Tower. So it's like premature, I think, still to try and manage it with Terraform that way, when literally we can manage everything you can do in Control Tower with native Terraform resources. We're talking AWS organizations, organizational units, service control policies, AWS config, AWS conformance packs, AWS guard duty, security hub, Macie, inspector, V2, AWS firewalls, AWS Shield Advanced, and the list, that's just what I rattle off the top of my head. And we have all of that for Terraform. Why would we try and use Control Tower and not have that granular control with IAC? It seems like a compromise that we're not ready to take, especially when most of the companies who go with Cloud Posse are ultimately attracted by the fact that everything is infrastructure as code.
Thank you for that. I have one more. So Atmos is not very friendly to put on an existing infrastructure, and all your reference architecture is something, well, to start from scratch.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, are you thinking how to backport it, or how to put it on existing infrastructure?
Yeah. So first, the genesis story kind of Cloud Posse. So, we started back in 2015, and we've been predominantly focused on solving one problem for customers for, every year since then, which is how do you set up AWS organizations the right way from the ground up with Terraform, with everything you need to enable other teams to do what they want. And that has led us to be hyper focused on kind of greenfield implementations in AWS. As our module ecosystem has become more and more popular, Atmos has become more popular, all of our reference architecture components has become more popular, it's become obvious we have to support brownfield. But there were a number of things that we did in the beginning that kind of made it harder for brownfield to work. And these are kind of mea culpas that we have. One of those is using Terraform remote state inside of components, which are basically root modules, because that kind of tightly couples your root modules to an implementation. So we've been making a lot of improvements in Atmos over the past year to 2 years to make Atmos more robust when it comes to discovery of information and outputs and reading remote state and so forth. So now with the latest versions of Atmos, it's really easy to read from remote state. And in fact, the release I wanted to talk about today, 1.196, which should be coming out by the end of the day, has two new community contributions. One for natively reading state from Google Cloud buckets, and one from and one to read Azure Object Store states. And this is really nice because it makes Atmos able to read remote state everywhere. So to answer your question, it is a little bit cumbersome for sure to implement the Cloud Posse reference architecture inside of an existing AWS organization, because the conventions that we follow are likely not the same exact conventions that have been followed. And as to the question about adopting Atmos with existing Terraform, another interesting thing. So we would like Atmos to be the right thing for both beginners and massive enterprises adopting Terraform at scale. We've been predominantly as a company focused on enterprises. They're obviously the ones who sponsor a lot of the development that we do and have some of the serious challenges. But as we've gained in popularity, we see a lot more interest now from smaller, earlier stage companies as well. And we also see more interest as we are implementing features such as Atmos Auth. We expect to continue to see a lot more users attracted to Atmos that maybe don't have some of those same requirements that we built Atmos for originally. So we're trying to make Atmos easier for existing Terraform projects. And we have actually a PR open somewhere that shows how to use Atmos with basically any Terraform code that you have. Yeah, that hasn't been published yet, and that's not really that helpful for you right now. The one thing to think about Atmos that makes it harder maybe for existing infrastructures is programmatic consistency. And it's been a guiding principle of Cloud Posse since the beginning of our company, which is one of the hardest things with large-scale infrastructure is just knowing how it works. And how it often evolves over time organically is you don't have consistent naming conventions. You don't have consistent architectures across your different accounts. You don't have consistent deployment techniques. You don't have consistent naming conventions or tagging conventions. You don't have consistent Terraform code. You don't have consistent way of configuring your Terraform code. You don't have consistent ways of running your Terraform. All of these reasons make it so hard for people to understand how to use infrastructure, how to explore the infrastructure, how to deploy your infrastructure, and so forth. So what we did at Cloud Posse with Atmos is make it very good at enforcing a convention. Pick a convention and stick with it. What that convention is, Atmos actually doesn't care. Yes, we are opinionated. We have our own conventions, how we use Atmos. But time and time again, when we look at other companies, how they adopted Atmos, it's like, oh, interesting. We didn't think of doing that. And we learned things from that. Or you should maybe try it another way. My point with that is when you have conventions, when you have consistency, it reduces the cognitive load for people to understand how it works, because once you understand the convention, everything else is on rails. And that's what Atmos helps you do. So to answer your question, is Atmos easy or hard to use for existing infrastructure? It can be hard if really rigid conventions weren't followed from the beginning.
But when you are doing it for the clients, were you successful in integrating it into existing, or you always go and do it from scratch?
Yeah, great question. So here's how we approach that when it comes up. So we do give customers a choice, but they almost always go another way. And let me explain. So if it's the customer implementing it for themselves, for example, we have a couple of ways of using our reference architecture. So if you go to cloudposse.com, /services, you'll see what our options are. Basically, we have this thing called a jump start, which is where we come in and implement everything. And then we have the quick start, which is where it's the same thing, but it's executed and implemented by a company's team. So it's at your own pace. And sometimes companies, they have a large AWS estate and they're looking at seeing how they can modernize, leveraging the reference architecture. And then the choice is always like, do we start new or do we reuse what we have? Well, building a net new infrastructure in place has so much risk and impact to the rest of the organization, depending on how many people are using it. For example, one of the things that we manage with infrastructure as code is AWS Identity Center. You can only have one active AWS Identity Center. So in order to be able to manage Identity Center with Terraform and using the conventions that we have, you first need to destroy the current Identity Center, which means locking everybody out of AWS and then re-provisioning it, reintegrating it with SSO. And that's not really a popular choice for a very active organization. It's prohibitive, possibly. The other issue is that when you work with an existing AWS organization, you should consider that it's basically tainted. There's so much cruft that's built up over the years in the form of IAC debt, or maybe it's not even IA, maybe it's not even infrastructure as code. Maybe it's just been ClickOps. And the best way is to create kind of a partition between the old world that we call your heritage environment and the new world. So start a net new AWS organization and start managing everything in that organization from the ground up with infrastructure as code. And then for the workloads that you cannot immediately migrate, or not immediately, but that you don't plan to immediately migrate, what you can do is you can adopt those legacy accounts inside of your new organization. And then inside of your new organization, you could, for example, put those under a separate OU, and you can start managing certain things inside of those legacy accounts the new way. For example, IAM and single sign-on, or connecting it to a transit gateway or things like that. So it offers kind of a bridge to move apps over and start your migration process. If you stay in the existing organization, it is basically tantamount to cowboy coding, which is this idea where you don't have a dev staging in production, you're just doing everything in production. Because you have an organization, you can only have one organization in an organization. You can have multiple organizational units, but those are different. So it doesn't really make sense to stay inside of an organization from our perspective. If we come into an engagement and they want us to help implement, for example, the Cloud Posse reference architecture in place, we discourage it because that's a lot of liability, right? That's a lot of liability for us as a company to come in and manage the AWS organization that's live carrying other workloads. And it's also a lot of liability for the customer because then we have access to all those live workloads. So that's the decision tree. I know that was a mouthful. Any questions on that?
Well, I guess the Jumpstart Accelerator, which is 2 weeks worth of doing things, that's not about also provisioning this bridge to the new world. That's only about provisioning the new stuff, right?
Exactly. And this is where I think AWS has a pretty good way of thinking about it. Mm-hmm. What you do is, okay, so the stages are kind of you assess the situation and whatnot, right? But the next thing after that is you mobilize, and then you modernize, and then you migrate. So mobilization is kind of where you set up what the future world could look like. You validate that would solve the problems that you're having in your current AWS estate. And most companies spend months, if not a year or more, just setting up that mobilize phase before they even get to think about how they're going to start migrating. And then when you go to migration, there are a lot of different techniques on how you go about migrations, depending on your tolerance for downtime, depending on the size of your data, depending on, like if you're using S3 buckets with petabyte of data or S3 buckets with gigabytes of data, it changes kind of the calculus of how you do a migration. So think about what you're trying to do and break it into phases. And then when you get to the point of migration, break it into migration waves. where you have a wave of migrating a certain set of services, doing ideally upfront the ones that are the least risky, the most ephemeral or disposable, just that you can show, you know, that you get some quick wins, especially on the software delivery side, to deliver your software faster.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I still like I tried Atmos, and I still feel like all the components are so dependent on each other
Yeah.
that it's very hard to start slow here. You're either full in here or
Yeah, well, yeah, so a few things. I mean, so one is we want to make sure we distinguish between a few different concepts, right? There's Cloud Posse, we're a company, we implement architectures, these blueprints.
Yeah.
Then there is our reference architecture, which is this docs.cloudposse.com. These docs, these weren't public like 3 years ago or something. They were private. We only shared them with active customers. Then we decided something bold. We made them all public. And this is kind of like the manual for how to use the product that you can buy. And it shows you kind of try before you buy, not in terms of implementing it, but in terms of at least seeing kind of what the experience would be, right? Putting our best foot forward. And obviously, before we did any of this stuff, we had our whole Cloud Posse module ecosystem. So if you've seen GitHub.com's Cloud Posse, these are our child modules. They're open source, but it's like walking into a Home Depot or a hardware store where, dude, hey, anything you want, it's yours. You can have it. But I hope you're a contractor. I hope you got an architect. I hope you got the team to build it and implement it. I hope you have, you know, et cetera, everything along the way. And that's what we solve then with that reference architecture. And then what we have is a separate organization not everyone knows about, but Cloud Posse Terraform components. And components are our root modules. And these are the ones that are opinionated, that are, like you're saying, kind of hard to spin up in an existing environment. Yeah. And
that's what I'm interested in. That's what I want to use those components on my architect, on my
understood. Yeah. And we can definitely help you with that, but we don't have a like public roadmap or guide that you can follow. Here's how to use those in an existing environment. But what I would expect, and this doesn't help you right now, but within the next 6 months or so, I'm hoping you're going to see a huge push by us to make components more reusable in brownfield environments. And the way we're going about that is everything that depends on that thing you've discovered that's called the account map.
Yeah.
That is going to be made optional. Like, we can't just rip it out because we have so many people using, but what we're going to do is allow everything that account map provided to be provided as an input to the component. And that allows components to be reusable in any environment. And then there's the other piece of this puzzle, which is Atmos. So Atmos is the other kind of cornerstone of what we do. This is a framework for how to describe infrastructure configuration at scale, right? And our reference architecture was built with that in mind. Our components were built with this in mind. So it's a lot of the assumptions that you wouldn't have had. And also the fact that we realized that account map was not a great solution for brownfield. So.
Yeah, if you think about it, like even those components, I look at them and I'm like, why are they not so generic that I can use it with any tool, like not just with Atmos? Like, I understand that.
Yeah.
Still,
we might have a little bit to do with. I mean, we're like, so I think
yes, exactly.
we've had people say, hey, we just want to use Terragrunt, or we want to use something else, and we're like, yeah, I get it, that's fine. But we are gonna, we're not gonna optimize to make somebody else's product work with it. We're gonna make it work the best with Atmos and the design considerations that we have there. Now, if it happens to work with other things, as it probably will down the road better, rising tide still floats all boats, but we'll probably still have the best solution working on top of all.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure. Any other? Well, I got something in the chat here. Let me see. Oh yeah, so Wacy shared some links, and
yeah, I was just going through them as I was refreshing myself on there, and it was, I mean, they're just maybe older links or something as things have moved.
Oh, interesting.
As they
Oh,
had found them. So,
Yep.
because I think,
Dan, since I see you commented there, can you record those broken links and let's make sure we fix those.
and I think to that same point that was brought up a minute ago is like when I was looking at Atmos and trying to incorporate it in like, and like my environment is like green brown, right? Like I just have built my entire landing zone and multi-account structure, but I had came in and like threw everything that I had already known about Terraform and getting connected through GitHub Actions at AWS and started looking at Atmos and trying to inject it in that newer, still like non-operational-esque environment. One of the big things for me that I think that really helped out was, obviously being on the Slack and seeing some of the comments that were, how things were being used and interacting with others, but it is really wrapping my head around the authentication, right, between Atmos and AWS and how different that was with how like my biased, and current use case was, which has literally just moved as of last night into like, hey, we should probably just use a Terraform plan role that can be assumed in a lot of other places as a
yeah.
centralized role. So I think that's also like one of the linchpins, right? Is like when you look at merging the two theories together, Atmos versus whatever else, is how those components can be blended into what people are already used to and using, and like how that kind of translates from maybe even some of those best practices, right? But like why it was being done that way, like what headaches and what issues have come about from doing it in other cases, because I mean a lot of it, even for me, was just learning why it's done that way and how that authentication path fully works, right, with
Yeah.
how my use case is. So
This is also though one of those mea culpas, I would say, or like, I mean, you come from a software background?
no, security.
Oh, security more, okay. See if I can quickly whip up an idea, kind of. So I think security as well, right? It's a moving target. Like if you look at classical network security and how it worked in a data center, the concepts loosely translate to what we do now in cloud environments. But I think some of the best practices that you would do in a classically networked environment are not optimal in a cloud environment. And some of the things we've learned, like within Terraform, that we started with as a best practice was, well, one of the things that really sucks with Terraform is like if you have to copy and paste resource IDs between root modules, like here's the VPC ID to use, it'd be much nicer if it just worked, right? If it could just know which VPC to use. And for a time there, I would say using Terraform remote state was the gold standard until it wasn't. And we stuck with it for a very long time because we came up with a framework that worked pretty well for us. So one of the things we did was we implemented this module called remote state, and this has the context of Atmos, and it's able to look up that root module, find the in this case the VPC, and it returns the outputs of that VPC as though this were deployed inside of our root module. So on the one hand, totally elegant, totally loved it when we came up with it, but has all these warts that you talk about. The other thing that we realized was problematic for us is if we go into providers was, well, one of the complicated things is knowing what role you need to do to perform what operation in what account. And the other complicated thing is when you have cross-account operations, like setting up a transit gateway or like a hub and spoke model, or like a primary and delegated, where you have something on two sides of two like permissions bound on either side of a permissions boundary. And that was complicated, but we solved it for our purposes and it's worked very well for many years. but it has made it very difficult inside of this kind of brownfield environment. So what we are doing now in Atmos, and this, I'd be curious if this is kind of how you approached things before, is so what we have been doing in Terraform was having Terraform do all role assumptions. So using Terraform to basically do role assumption as code and knowing how to do that. But I think a lot of people do it where you run Terraform in an environment that already has a permissions context to do what it needs to do. Before I continue, which one of those resonates with you?
Well, like I said, it changed as of last night, or it is changing. But so we have actions, right, in GitHub Enterprise Cloud or whatever, and I set up the AWS code build runners that act as my GitHub
Okay,
runners, instance profiles that perform a hub and spoke authentication method, right?
Yeah.
The issue that I came across was really more of the maintenance and eventually security, but the maintenance of in a large multi-account structure, how do you maintain a static list of every single, spoke role having access to that GitHub policy or that bucket, that KMS key, and to assume at what levels so that you can perform automated tasks as well as manual tasks. And those policies just end up getting so huge because you have to statically define, unless you're doing conditioning, right? And even then it gets a little bit tougher. So we actually, I'm moving now to a kind of hybrid where I have a hub and spoke for the authentication or the administration across, cross account as well, for Terraform to go out of that runner. And as a Terraform ops role, essentially, that can be assumed as a centralized point to interact with that bucket at a minimum from a read perspective for planning, right? So it's really become a combination of both, which is why I was looking at the rest of your authentication strategy for Atmos, which was a plan and the apply sort of role scheme. So
Yeah, that resonates. That's similar. And what we implemented kind of that identity architecture with something that we call AWS Teams.
Yeah.
And I think now we would call this something different, but this is how we manage kind of the federated IAM architecture across accounts for machine roles versus single sign-on, which is for humans. And one of the things, I don't know if you directly addressed, but is that how you do things as a human is often different, or if you're using AWS SSO, is going to be different than how you do things through automation, for example, with a planner role and an apply role in GitHub Actions and so forth. And this challenge of knowing what role to use when and making the Terraform work regardless of how that is why we've introduced under Atmos tools, the thing I was talking about earlier, Atmos Auth. And Atmos Auth, the idea is that you can implement your identities, your providers and your identities in Atmos configuration, and then you can associate those identities with the components, and then you can know which identity to use when trying to operate on a given component in a certain environment.
Did that come from the more recent release for the variables for provider authentication in Terraform?
No, that did not. That is, that would have been very nice to have for a long time. It's one of the big reasons we've had provider generation. But no, this is just more generally in that. I guess you can probably solve some of this now because of what you said, that you can have variables there. But it just means you're going to have another module that that figures that out, which is basically coming back to the account map.
Yes.
And
and I guess from the other perspective, right, is from the machine accounts, like that is all handled and assumable, and everything's taken care of with just the actions itself, right? The AWS credentials action and that job, and then the difference between whenever we do it as humans is like right now we just use an override file that has an assume role underneath the back end configuration so that we can have that blank S3 provider config as well as the override. And as long as we're logged into a role that can assume the role fits in that override, and those are some of the issues we ended up, having with, how that session context comes over, or in that authentication context, I guess, to AWS, where it was like, oh yeah, it's an ARN that you're coming over as, but it's really ARN STS instead of ARN IAM. And just don't even do anything ever with the AWS reserved SSO roles in any sort of policies. It's nasty. I hate it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you're touching on like the problems we've solved in one way, but now we're looking to generalize it through a combination of functionality in Atmos, improving role assumption, and then also making the components a little bit less opinionated.
Awesome.
So thanks for those questions.
One about EKS. I was is EKS with Carpenter on Fargate still a thing, or it's now not the preferred way to do things? How do you do it in your world?
Interesting. Somebody recently asked this, and we put together a blog post because it has come up more and more.
Oh, really?
Was that you or no?
No.
Okay. So I think this gives a fair and balanced situational appraisal. I'll post it
please
in the chat here. So
thank you.
There are different, there's something that I like to always bring up, and if you're on office hours, you'll hear me say it, is the problem solution cycle. With every problem you solve, you just unlock the next level of problems. And we sometimes, I think, go down a rabbit hole in automation because we try to automate everything, and we encounter problems that maybe not are problems for everyone. But here's what we've encountered. So is Carpenter still the right way to go for EKS? Yes, it is. Like we still, every time we deploy EKS, we use Carpenter. But what we used to do is always deploy Carpenter on Fargate nodes because it seemed perfect, right? You have the nodes, the Fargate capacity that runs your operator for Carpenter, and then the rest of the nodes are managed by Carpenter. But we ran into practical problems doing it that way, which is you cannot automate it with Terraform. And we describe the problem here is that you basically end up in a bootstrap deadlock. And what we decided to do instead, therefore, was to recommend using AWS managed node groups, which don't have this problem, to run your controllers. And if you're not trying to optimize for cold starts or like bringing everything up or automated testing, then you don't need to worry about this. But for example, our EKS component, we have automated tests. We need to be able to make sure that when we provision this, it comes up and we can deploy a service to it. And we couldn't do that fully automated using Carpenter. And the reason for that is, using Carpenter on Fargate. And the reason for that, let me see here. Yeah.
Probably need to put core DNS also on Fargate.
Yeah. And we had other problems with like core DNS where if where core DNS would all end up on one well that was before when we had on nodes, it could end up on one node and then it wouldn't fall it would if core DNS gets rescheduled and there's no backup, then everything on the cluster grinds to a halt until that new core DNS pod comes back online.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah, the reason why I'm saying is that I had recently a call with AWS, and they're like, "Oh, there's this idea. You need to put the your Carpenter controller on Fargate." I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." I started to investigate, and I found that that was the official way in the the most popular Terraform module for EKS. And then like I was like, oh, here it is. Then it is something people do. And then probably 2 versions behind, like they just removed it, and now it's again on managed node groups.
Really?
Like, yes.
Oh, I would love, could you please share that? I would love to update this post with that information. And so this is also something you'll find in our sweetops community. There's been conversations around this. Also, we thought it was interesting that Carpenter's own guidance has evolved to using managed node groups here. But we couldn't pinpoint exactly when that changed happened.
So if you open this in version 20, and I even went back to I shared the link in Zoom. Yeah, I even went back and found the exact version. I will send the version on which they changed it. It's on 20.9 or something, 20.10, I think. Yeah, crazy. So as I understand, like, nobody likes this idea anymore. Yeah, here it is with the managed, but before it was with Carpenter and Fargate and me.
Yeah. Well, that is I guess a little bit of more confirmation then. I guess if we look at the blame on this, we'll see.
If you check 20.8, that that is with Fargate, and like by default.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
We'll investigate that some more. Yeah.
And also, I wanted to ask, what's your opinion on EKS Auto Mode?
Yeah, it's a good one and it's a sore point. So that might be the best alternative given everything we've just discussed today on the call, but don't have anybody using it, can't tell you. We haven't added auto mode support to our EKS components yet, by and large part because auto mode is actually the way it was explained to me was that you can actually run it concurrently, auto mode with self-managed node groups and AWS managed node groups and auto mode. And most of the implementations and PRs that we've received didn't show that they had, explored those edge cases yet. There were, we should probably have a write-up just on this again with auto mode. Long and short of it is, we want to support it, but we don't have experience operating on it yet. And I guess it's probably pretty good to let things burn in. If anyone else here has more experience using EKS Auto Mode, I'd like to know though, and how that's worked out. So
Nobody wants to pay 20 extra % on each node.
Yeah, what I want it to be is basically GKE Autopilot. But I don't know if it fulfills on that promise.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, we are at time for today then. Thanks everyone for the questions, and we will be back next week, same time, same place. We'll be posting a recording of today's session to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse where you'll find that recording. If you want more support for any reasons, we have commercial support available at cloudposse.com/support. We support our module ecosystem, our reference architecture, Atmos, and everything in between, and have different packages depending on your needs. Getting more involved in our community is easy. You can go to cloudposse.com/Slack to join our Slack community. We have our every office hours for the last, 5 years or more has been posted to cloudposse.com/office hours. And we have, have been posted to youtube.com/cloudposse. And you can register for our live office hours. If you are listening to this via recording, you can register and join these live and ask your own questions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Thanks everyone for your time today. We'll be back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.